the convention set to hold a formal vote on banning churches from membership with women pastors or women in pastoral leadership. Supporters of the ban cite what they believe are a number of scriptures in the Bible that they claim point to women not being allowed to hold leadership positions within the church.
If you're not going to abide by what the scripture says, then please explain to me what the point of the entire organization is. What's up, guys? John Claymore here. And before we get started, I hope you guys had a happy Father's Day. I hope you guys had a very good Father's Day. I hope you guys ate very, very good. And I hope you guys actually got a chance to enjoy yourselves over this past weekend. I know that I was able to, but I know I'm a little bit late on this story here, and I know I didn't post anything on Saturday or Sunday, and I obviously meant to do so, but once again, though, things obviously do happen. And at this moment in time, this right here is the only video that's planned for today. I do have a lot of content coming out this week, but I do want to take on the story here because the more and more I look at this situation, the more and more I read into it and get a lot of other, varying takes on this, the more and more that I look at this and think to myself, well, if we're going to go against what Scripture says, then what's the actual point of even having an actual organization? So basically the story is that Southern Baptist, and of course, I can already hear somebody in the comment section clamoring about this and clamoring about how it is that the church is anti-woman and all that type of stuff there. They have basically failed to amend their own little constitution that basically says that, look, we don't think that women should be in leadership positions as far as pastoral is concerned. Now, I want to go ahead and say this right now. Some churches will have women in leadership position when it comes to prayer and youth ministry, stuff like that. I'm not a Baptist. I'm more of a Methodist. But then again, at the same time, though, I can also hear somebody saying there's an issue there, too. Look. To each is their own when it comes to denomination. I'm not going to get into who's right, who's not wrong type thing. As long as my honest feeling has always been, stay to Scripture. Just stay to Scripture. If you stay to Scripture, you'll be fine. Which is obviously a problem that we're having because we have a lot of churches, a lot of organizations that for whatever reason don't want to stay to Scripture. It's part of the reason why it is that people, when they talk about the church, they notice that something is actually going on with false pastors, false ministers, false prophets. And of course, to go on top of this, you've also got the wokeification of the church itself, which you could argue could be the case here. But then again, though, when you actually look at it, you find out that there may actually be something else going on below the surface. But let's go ahead and dive into this. Let's go ahead and look at this first part of this report because obviously, this is an issue that has gotten sparked recently that a lot of people are talking about, and people obviously do have concerns, especially churchgoers in the Baptist ministry. Let's go ahead and roll this.
The nation's largest Protestant organization, the Southern Baptist Convention, meeting in Indianapolis and set to make some major decisions on controversial issues that will ripple through the Christian community. On the agenda at this week's annual meeting, a sexual assault and abuse database with the names of offenders who worked at membership churches, and a vote on banning churches from membership if they allow women to serve as pastors. DeJuan Hogarth tracking the news from the Southern Baptist Convention. DeJuan, some hot button stuff on the agenda for SBC. What's it mean for member churches here at home?
Yeah, Joel, I've been watching that meeting all day. And for one, the database is something that member churches have been asking of the convention for a number of years. Pastors and leaders have.
There is also the topic of in vitro fertilization. Now, I want you guys to go ahead and know right quick before we go any further, I'm not going to be spending any time talking about that issue because I think that that's an issue that I think I need to look a little bit more into. I'm going for the most part by what the actual news reports decided to, let's just say, cover. But still at the same time, though, I do believe that these people failed, and I mean the media and those reporting on the issue by not being 100% honest about the second issue that was left out, which, by the way, is the issue of abusers in the church itself. That right there being people in positions of leadership actually abusing children and other church members. I really and truly believe that right there was probably the main thing that these people wanted to discuss when it actually came to the topic of this particular amendment. However, it got mixed up with the topic of not being able to get an amendment through when it comes to female pastors. I think that that's probably what happened there. And I think if I had to criticize anything, I would have to criticize them on how they actually tried to get the amendment passed. I think if you did this all as single issues, you probably would have gotten a much easier vote, or a much more easier vote on the amendment itself. But let's continue.
Would help them better respond to sexual abuse and prevent them from unknowingly hiring offenders who were involved involved and or convicted of sex crimes in the past. Additionally, the convention set to hold a formal vote on banning churches from membership with women pastors or women in pastoral leadership. Supporters of the ban cite what they believe are a number of scriptures in the Bible that they claim point to women not being allowed to hold leadership positions within the church or have ministerial authority over men. Reverend Barbara Laverin with Baptist Women in Ministry believes this is not in alignment with what Jesus would have wanted. Prevent them from unknowingly hiring offenders who were involved and or convicted of sex crimes in the past. Additionally, the convention set to hold a formal vote on banning churches from membership with women pastors or women in pastoral leadership. Supporters of the ban cite what they believe are a number of scriptures in the Bible that they claim point to women not being allowed to hold leadership positions within the church or have ministerial authority over men. Reverend Barbara Laverin with Baptist Women in Ministry believes this is not in alignment with what Jesus would have wanted.
Now, really quick, I want to say this because obviously you guys heard something in there that wasn't just about women. You heard about offenders, you heard about abusers, okay? And that right there would automatically kind of, how do I say, send a bit of a trigger in your mind saying, whoa, 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 wait. Why did like the Associated Press, why did all these news outlets, all these newspaper, or not really newspaper organizations, they're pretty much online now, but why did all these publications put out the fact that the church was suddenly saying, look, we don't want women pastors, but yet they also failed to amend this. They left something out. What they left out was they left out the part about the people who had been in trouble for, let's just say, extremely bad conduct, meaning not just bad conduct, but extremely, well, you got to be careful with how you say it here on this platform, but definitely conduct of the abusive nature. And of course, the church was looking into this and that they were saying, look, you know what, maybe it's probably a good idea that we tell these people who have offended or maybe reoffended that maybe they're not welcome back. Now, I understand that, of course, the church and me being a Christian, you're supposed to be, how do I say, you're supposed to be open to everybody. The church is supposed to be open. However, the problem is this right here. Sometimes when you open the door a little bit too much, the wrong kind of people come in. Of course, you basically allow wolves to come inside. This is kind of what's going on with the wokeifying of the church. Now, on the surface, you might think to yourself, okay, we don't want people to stay gay because obviously their soul is at stake. But at the same time, though, we also know that if brought in the proper setting, if actually preached to, evangelized, if actually reached, then a person could actually convert, a person could actually make some changes in their life and all that type of good stuff there. The problem is, next thing you know, if you make it too daggone inclusive, next thing you know, you've got wolves literally running around the church. And the next thing you know, not only are they running around the church, but next thing you know, the flock itself is corrupted. And to go on top of this, people end up a lot of times going back to their previous ways, in some cases being a lot worse. I think that the church has a right to say who they want to come in and who they don't want to come in. I'm not saying I fully agree with everything, even though I obviously would not want offenders and reoffenders. I mean, you don't let the peas inside of a church. You don't let the peas near children. Obviously, I have to say it that way. Screw it. You don't let pedophiles near children is basically what I'm trying to say. The other day, I saw a debate between Pearl Davis, and I'm not the biggest fan of Pearl, and Lauren Chin, but she said something I thought was very, very, let's just say very, very upfront. And of course, the thing that she had said is that you don't let pedophiles near towards the front of the church. You don't let them near children. I think that that's the problem here, is that the church itself is looking for a way to get these types of people away from their church. They don't want these people preying on their flock. They don't want these people potentially preying on their children. Yet for some odd reason, we're focusing in on the fact that the church has just said, you know what, man, we don't want women in pastoral leadership. On that topic there, what I would say is stick to scripture. Now, guys, the Christian Broadcast Network, they also got a hold of this too, and we'll get to that in a second. But this next thing I'm about to show you guys is kind of the problem that we're having here. And a lot of people are going to sit here and they're going to look at this and they're going to say, what, you're not allowed to ask questions? No. You're allowed to ask questions. Definitely ask questions. You need to have a conversation. But at the same time, though, at the end of the day, if you are in pastoral leadership, then you need to stick to scripture. Not try to interpret it how the hell you think or how you want it to be, but let's look.
Is intertextual. Whenever we read a book, we don't just read one line out of the book and not allow it to speak with other parts of the larger story. So when people focus in on that one line and not even pay attention to the context of that line, which was that Paul was speaking to a specific church in a specific time, we are failing to think critically. And we're also failing to allow God to move in today's context, in today's time.
I'm pretty sure that the scripture has been interpreted a million times, a million different ways. And I'm pretty sure that it's been interpreted for centuries. And I'm pretty sure every single line, every single word has been interpreted. And I'm pretty sure that people have been critically thinking about this for a while. So I can't see how it is that you can come up with any type of thought on the matter that, how do I say, has not already been discussed before. You're going to hear me say this, especially towards the end of the video, more and more. Stick to actual scripture. Just stick to scripture, all right? Let me answer everything she said with this here. Pastors, evangelists, theologians, not just that, but also some of the greatest ministers of all time. They have gone through the text. They have gone to Strong's dictionary. They have gone through multiple different languages of the text, actual interpretation. And it seems to me that what's happening here is that the Southern Baptist Church is simply sticking to Scripture. You need to stick to Scripture. If anything, I'm actually a little bit taken aback by the fact that the voting to secure the amendment kind of failed. He probably should have done two separate amendments rather than one. But it seems to me like what happened here is that the Southern Baptist Church may have actually been, how do I say, they may have been taken advantage of in the press, if you ask me, because as I said before, this amendment that these people were trying to actually pass was also an amendment that was designed to keep pedophiles out of the church too, keep abusers away from their youth, keep abusers out of the church itself, especially those in leadership positions. I think that right there was the real actual story, but the press, for whatever reason, chose to run with the female narrative instead to say, hey, look, you know, these white, racist, white, bigoted men don't want women in leadership positions or pastoral positions. Well, if you actually go read the scripture, you will find out that the Apostle Paul basically said that women don't need to be in leadership positions, at least as far as when it comes to being a pastor. I think that right there is the heart of the matter here, is that the Southern Baptists, they have decided for the most part to stick to Scripture, which is exactly what they should do. However, let's take a look at exactly how CBN decided that they wanted to report the story. So let's go ahead and play this one.
Final day of their annual meeting, Southern Baptists rejected an amendment to formally ban churches with women pastors. They also voted to oppose in vitro fertilization.
As many as are opposed, would you indicate by lifting your ballots?
In one of the most anticipated votes, the delegates called messengers voted down a measure enshrining a ban on churches with women pastors in the convention's constitution.
It failed to reach the two-thirds threshold that's required to make it an amendment.
Earlier, they expelled a Virginia church that believes women can serve as a senior pastor.
Women have had a prominent role within the ministry and pastoral positions within the leadership of First Alexandria for over 44 years.
Okay, you guys obviously saw about 45 seconds there. Trust me, there is going to be something else that's going to come up, so that way I can at least kind of explain to you guys exactly how it probably should go, or at least as far as how I can see this, because I personally saw this yesterday in church, and obviously the church that I went to, which, by the way, was with family, obviously it's a much more secluded, old school, out in the country, good old-fashioned church, of course, and I've always believed that is where you actually get real unadulterated truth, because in some cases the big church itself can kind of sort of be, let's just say, the messaging can be a little bit, sometimes it can come off as a little bit manipulative, and of course at the same time, if you're not completely honest, especially when it comes to Scripture, and not just being completely honest, but completely factual as well, truthful to what the Scripture says, it does leave the church open for the possibility of being wokeified. Now, I wanted to say that before I answered anything that was said about the pastor or the leader from the church in Alexandria, First Alexandria. And of course, when he says that women have been in prominent leadership positions, what I would like to know is exactly what kind of leadership do you mean? This amendment was about pastoral, meaning female pastors. And as I said before, there was also an amendment, also a provision there that talked about repeat offenders inside the church itself. I also mentioned how it was that the AP and many other people who reported on this story actually just left that entire bit out. They chose to focus on the female narrative rather than looking at the entire amendment itself. As I said before, the church probably should have split the amendments up, and I'm pretty sure if they split the amendments up, they probably would have gotten maybe hopefully 100% on when it came to the whole notion of not letting abusers into the church or letting abusers into positions of power in the church, whereas the female pastoral leadership issue could have been something that could have been debated at a later date. But still, at the same time, though, I don't think there's anything to critically think about, especially given the fact that we've been critically interpreting Scripture for centuries now. And it sounds to me like it's pretty daggone obvious that they don't. I mean, the Apostle Paul basically said women are not supposed to be in areas of leadership when it comes to pastoral positions. Administrative, yeah. Prayer, yeah. Lower level, guidance, yeah. Youth ministry, yeah. But definitely not the actual pastor itself. Let's continue.
The SBC deemed the church's stance in conflict with the Baptist faith and message. Ed Stetzer, dean of Talbot School of Theology at Biola University, says the narrow defeat sends a message.
By the amendment failing, it means there's not a new rule in place that, for example, you can't use the word pastor at any term like children's pastor that a woman might be in. So that tells you that the vast majority of Southern Baptists want to hold the line at a complementarian view.
Lawrence Smith is a messenger and communications director for the Kentucky Baptist Convention.
It just shows you that Southern Baptists are determined to abide by what the Scripture says about the office
voted
of
to
pastor.
hand over the issue to the executive committee.
For the sake of just the rightness, the goodness of followers of Jesus doing what they should do, there needs to be paths to take it seriously. And what I would say is it's not going to be easy, and it may be one of the more controversial things that they lead, but that's what leaders do.
Meanwhile, from a field of 6 candidates, the SBC elected North Carolina's Clint Presley as its new president. Presley is known for his conservative leadership style.
And it took 2 ballots, or 3 actually, to elect someone. But I think Clint's going to do a great job, a great man of God, and he'll do a lot to. If there are any lingering fractures among the messengers, among our convention, he'll work to heal those.
Let that segment run a little bit longer. Number one, what my man was saying there about sticking to Scripture, nothing wrong with that at all. As a matter of fact, you need to stick to Scripture. And I would also argue that at this moment in time, at this particular critical stage in our existence, sticking to Scripture would be the most important thing. Abuse reform, I think, is, and even CBN, in my opinion, kind of failed on this one because abuse reform should have been the number one thing that should have been pointed out from the very, very start. Hey, look, we're trying to reform our system, trying to reform our database, so that way nobody else can actually get into our church that's actually committed any form of crimes or crimes against other members or against children. We also, at the exact same time, want to make sure we don't allow these people into the church, so that way they cannot offend and hurt our flock, hurt our congregation. I think that right there probably should have been the main thing here, rather than just the whole topic of women in pastoral positions. Now, I did say earlier that I was going to talk a little bit about how I personally think this should be done. I don't see there's anything wrong with what I'm about to say, but at the same time, if you think that I'm off on this right here, please let me know in the comment section. I would love to hear what you guys have got to say. So yesterday I'm in church, and pastor, of course, he gives the sermon. Of course, he gives a message, good sermon, good message. Of course, the Father's Day sermon, talking about men, talking about fathers. And of course, all types of good stuff that you would probably want to hear when it comes to this topic of Father's Day and exactly how important that it is. By the way, my original way of opening this video out involved something pretty daggone crude, and I'm kind of glad I did not do that because it probably would have been taken the wrong way. Still, at the same time, though, the point is this right here. Fathers are obviously important. Now, I don't want to make this just about fathers, especially the very, very end, because obviously mothers are important too. We need to have both, and we need to have families that have both a mother and a father. Just figure I'd go ahead and say that, and by mother and father, I mean an actual adult human female and an actual adult human male. The point is this right here. During the actual sermon towards the very end, one of the ladies in the church, he asked her, can you lead us in prayer to close? I don't see anything wrong with that. She's allowed to lead us in prayer to close. She's allowed to lead us in prayer to start. She's allowed to lead us in prayer. She's allowed to lead the choir. She's allowed to be around the children, to actually be a youth minister, especially small children, because obviously children's church is very important. I've got no issue with that, and I can't find anywhere. And of course, I'm not the biggest Christian scholar in the world. I'm just a simple, average Christian. And of course, to go on top of this, I can't find anywhere where the scripture says that women cannot teach kids, that they can't actually be a teacher or something like that. Where we do have an issue is with the topic of overall female pastoralship. And of course, that pastoralship is something that's been debated for a very, very long time. My advice, if it was me, or if I was an average churchgoer going to one of these churches, it would be this here: stick to scripture. Let me say this to end this video. If I'm going to a church and I find out that this church is not sticking to scripture, I'm probably not going to want to go back. I really think that not going to scripture or not sticking to scripture is kind of what led to the same type of situation I talked about in this video here about the whole Mark Driscoll situation. It's that type of stuff there that is in a lot of ways given the church a bit of a bad name over the past few years because we've been watering it down. Look, I understand presentation. I think I even mentioned something about that earlier, that presentation is in fact important, but not everybody's going to go for a certain presentation. Some people like the good old-fashioned going out to a church in the middle of nowhere and seeing an old school type sermon, and some people would prefer to go to a much, much larger church. My advice to this simply is right here. If you're going to go to church, make sure that at least they are sticking to scripture and they are at least trying everything they can to live by the values that they espouse, meaning they're trying to live by the actual values that are taught. I mean, I'm a Christian myself, and I actually do believe in God. Unlike some of the people out there who claim that they are cultural Christians, when in reality, they're actually atheists, just claiming they're culturally Christian, so that way they can act like they've at least got some type of moral system, when in fact they've never been saved. And a lot of these people, quite frankly, don't even know Scripture or even Christian or Christianity. One of those people is Richard Dawkins, who goes out of his way to make fun of Christians all the time, and he's also the key atheist they always keep putting out there, even though he's been destroyed in several conversations by guys like John Lennox, and of course he refuses to have a conversation with William Lane Craig. But still at the same time, though, the point is this right here. Stick to Scripture. If you stick to Scripture, you're not going to have a problem. And I think that when you hear somebody talking about we need to critically think about what's said, and there's certain little verses that are being left out, I hate to tell you this, and I hate to tell her this right here, but I'm going to say it one more time. The Scripture has been interpreted, and it continues to get interpreted more and more and more. And guess what it does? It doesn't change. It stays the same. God does not change. He does not change from what he is. The world changes, but God doesn't. So remember that when you have these types of conversations with people, and remember that right there when you're actually in the church. But you guys tell me what you think in the comment section. I would love to hear what you guys have got to say. Please hit the like button, subscribe, share the video. It's the only video that's planned for today. I may have a big video out tomorrow because the whole Caitlin Clark situation, I haven't done a sports video in a while, but I want to talk about that one because obviously we got false narratives out there, but make sure you guys stick around for that. Once again, please hit the like button, subscribe, share the video, and I'll see you guys later.